Some people can't go 5 minutes without being offended. A look, a word, a comment online, a tone of voice. Suddenly, they spiral. They obsess. They replay the moment in their mind 100 times, crafting better comebacks they never said. They lose peace over opinions that never mattered. And in doing so, they hand their power to someone else. But the Stoic doesn't live like that. The Stoic trains for something greater, emotional independence. The ability to walk through insults like walking through fog, to hear words meant to wound and feel nothing. Not because they're cold, but because they're free. Because the insult that finds no landing strip in the ego simply fades. No fuel, no fire, no reaction. And maybe that's what we've forgotten in this noisy world, that not every opinion needs a response. That strength is not in striking back, but in staying still. That you don't have to win every exchange. You just have to rise above it. So if you're tired of carrying every comment like a wound, if you're ready to build unshakable peace in a world full of noise, then this episode is for you. Let's begin. 1. Offense is a trap. Don't step in. It doesn't matter how wise you are, how successful, or how calm. At some point, someone will try to provoke you. It might be subtle, a sarcastic remark, a dismissive look, a question loaded with judgment, or it might be direct, a personal attack designed to sting. And in that moment, something primal rises. The urge to defend, to strike back, to prove them wrong. But here's the truth. Offense is a trap, and the moment you step into it, you're no longer in control. They are. The Stoics understood this better than most. They taught that no one can harm your soul unless you allow it. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, the insult isn't the problem. Your interpretation of it is. You don't feel insulted because of the words. You feel insulted because you believed them, or because you feared they might be true, or because you tied your worth to someone else's opinion. That's where the pain comes from. Not the outside, but the inside. So what do you do when someone throws verbal poison at you? You don't drink it. You see it for what it is, bait, and you walk past it. You observe the insult, but you don't personalize it. You hear the words, but you don't absorb them. You remind yourself, this is not about me. This is a reflection of them, their bitterness, their insecurity, their need to feel powerful by making someone else feel small. And here's the most dangerous part. When you take the bait, when you engage, when you react, you validate their strategy, you feed the dynamic, you step into their world, and now you're playing their game, with their rules. But you weren't born to play defense against shadows. You weren't made to spend your energy correcting misperceptions or pleasing egos. You were made for something higher, for self-possession, for clarity, for freedom. Imagine standing at the edge of a swamp. Someone yells from the middle, hoping you'll jump in and wrestle with them, but you stay on the dry ground. You smile, you say nothing, you walk away. That's strength, that's restraint. And that's how the Stoic handles offense, not with passive submission, but with sovereign stillness. Because true power is not proving you're right. It's knowing that you don't need to. This doesn't mean you become numb or disconnected. It means you learn to choose when and how you engage. It means you stop giving emotional access to people who haven't earned it. It means you understand that offense is often a distraction, a way to pull you off your path, to tempt you into drama, to make your mission smaller than it is. And you don't have time for that, not if you're serious about who you're becoming. So next time someone tries to offend you, Pause. Breathe. Don't step into the trap. Smile if you want. Say nothing if you must. And move forward with your energy intact. Because peace is more valuable than the last word. And your growth is more important than their approval. 2. Let go of emotional reflexes. It's easy to believe that how we feel is beyond our control, that emotions simply happen to us like storms rolling in from nowhere. But the Stoics saw things differently. They knew that between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is your freedom, your reflex, that instant emotional spike when someone mocks you or criticizes you. That's the moment to watch. Because what you do in that space determines whether you stay grounded or get dragged. When someone insults you, your ego wants to flare. It wants to jump in, to react, to protect itself. But that's not strength, that's instinct. And instinct isn't always right. A dog barking doesn't require you to bark back. A child throwing a tantrum doesn't require you to throw one too. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. Emotions are visitors. You can acknowledge them without obeying them. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that's exactly what happens with emotional reflexes. We don't just feel insulted. We replay the moment, magnify the slight, imagine what others think, and spiral into anxiety or resentment. But none of that is real. It's all internal drama, and you can walk away from it the moment you decide to stop rehearsing pain. So how do you train yourself to respond instead of react? You practice awareness. You feel the anger rise, but you don't let it drive. You notice the tension in your chest, and you breathe into it. You remind yourself that reacting gives away your strength, and slowly you create a gap between emotion and action. That's emotional maturity. That's discipline. That's what the Stoics called prohairesis, the ability to choose your response. Letting go of emotional reflexes doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means owning them. It means recognizing that someone else's behavior doesn't have to dictate your state of mind. You don't have to match their chaos. You don't have to stoop to their level. You can stay rooted in your values, grounded in your peace, and clear in your mission. The truth is, most insults say more about the speaker than the target. They're projections, not reflections. And when you understand that, you stop taking things personally. You start asking better questions. Why does this bother me? What part of me is insecure? What am I really trying to defend? And with each answer, you reclaim a bit of your power. You realize that no one controls your emotional life unless you let them in. The next time you feel your reflexes kick in, that heat in the chest, that clenching of the jaw, pause. Don't resist it. Just observe. Let the feeling rise and let it pass, like a wave, like a gust of wind. That space, that quiet space where you stay centered, that's where the Stoic lives. And in that space, you are no longer just reacting to the world, you are shaping it. 3. Laugh at what was meant to hurt. There's a strange kind of power in laughter, not the kind that mocks others, but the kind that disarms pain. When someone throws an insult your way, and you respond not with anger or defensiveness, but with a calm smile or even a chuckle, you flip the dynamic. You take the weapon from their hand and turn it into air. Because the moment you laugh, really laugh, at what was meant to hurt, you're no longer a target. You're free. The Stoics weren't comedians, but they understood irony better than most. Life itself, they knew, is full of absurdity. People will attack you not because of who you are, but because of what they project onto you. They'll call you names based on misunderstandings. They'll misinterpret your silence, your confidence, your boundaries. And if you carry all of that seriously, if you wear every insult like armor, you become heavy, burdened, distracted from your path. But if you can learn to see the comedy in it, the smallness of the insult, the weakness behind the attack, suddenly it loses its bite. That's not weakness, that's control. Laughter in the face of insult is not indifference. It's transcendence. Think of it like this. If someone throws a rotten fruit at a mountain, does the mountain flinch? If a child yells that the ocean is stupid, does the tide retreat? Of course not. Strength doesn't respond to every noise, and neither should you. In fact, the person who insults you expects one of two things: that you'll be hurt or that you'll retaliate. Either way, they win. They've pulled you into their emotional game. But when you laugh, they're disarmed, confused, because they were expecting pain, and you gave them peace. They were expecting war, and you brought ease. That's not just stoicism, that's power. Seneca wrote, "A wise man is indifferent to injury, not because he feels nothing, but because he sees through it." And sometimes what he sees is that the insult isn't even about him. It's a mirror reflecting the speaker's inner conflict, their own envy, their own insecurity. When you understand that, even their harshest words become a kind of theater, loud but not real, and you can smile at the performance. This doesn't mean you ignore abuse or let people walk over you. Boundaries still matter, but it means that within those boundaries, you don't carry unnecessary emotional weight. You don't stew in imaginary battles. You don't build an identity around wounds. There's a freedom that comes with not taking things so seriously, with learning to say, "That's a ridiculous thing to say, and I'm not going to let it live in my mind," with remembering that you are not obligated to suffer every time someone else is unkind. So the next time someone tries to hurt you with words, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Or can I rise above it, maybe even laugh at it and move on? Because when you stop taking everything as an attack, you start living like someone who can't be shaken. And that's when real peace begins. 4. Insults lose power when unreceived. An insult, at its core, is a message, but it only works if it gets delivered. If someone hands you a burning coal, you get burned only if you hold it. But if you refuse to grasp it, if you let it fall, the heat never reaches you. This is the essence of Stoic detachment from offense. An insult has no power unless you accept it. And the moment you stop receiving every jab, every judgment, every dig as something personal, you become immune. There's a story from ancient China where a man traveled to insult the Buddha. He hurled words at him for hours, but the Buddha just sat there, calm and silent. Finally, the man demanded a response. The Buddha said, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does it belong?" The man replied, "To the one who offered it." And the Buddha answered, "Then I do not accept your insults. They remain with you." That's more than wisdom. It's a superpower. Imagine moving through your day knowing that you no longer have to carry every stray opinion, that not every frown or side comment needs to become your burden. Most people collect insults like souvenirs, carrying them for years, replaying them in their heads, letting them shape how they see themselves. But what if you could leave those moments where they happened, in the past, with the person who spoke them? To do that, you have to rewire your reflex. We're conditioned to seek approval, so when someone disapproves, it feels like a threat. But here's the truth. Not everyone has the insight or authority to define you. And even if they did, Why should your inner life depend on their temporary opinion? Their anger, their sarcasm, their bitterness. None of that is yours unless you make it yours. Epictetus said, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And this judgment, this belief that their words define you, that's what gives the insult power. But when you choose not to absorb it, when you let it pass like a cloud in the sky, something incredible happens. The insult evaporates, it loses momentum, and the person who tried to wound you is left with their own noise, not yours." This is the kind of emotional freedom that Stoicism offers. Not the kind that makes you cold or detached from life, but the kind that lets you walk lightly without carrying unnecessary suffering. It's the difference between being a sponge and being a mirror. The sponge absorbs everything. The mirror reflects it back. You can choose which one to be. The next time someone tries to offend you, don't resist. Don't retaliate. Don't internalize. Just don't receive it. Let it fall. Let it return to silence. Let it stay with the person who sent it, because not everything thrown at you needs to be caught. And that's how you protect your peace. Not by fighting insults, but by becoming the kind of person who no longer catches them. 5. Master your response. Master your peace. Peace is not something you stumble into. It's not handed to you by others. It's something you create, moment by moment, by choosing your responses carefully. The way you respond to insults, setbacks, and challenges shapes your emotional landscape more than any external condition ever could. And if you master that response, if you learn to pause, to assess, to stay still instead of explode, you gain access to a deeper kind of peace, one that no one can steal. The Stoics never promised a life without conflict. They knew the world would test you, people would misunderstand you, criticize you, even try to tear you down. But their point was, none of that has to disturb your soul, unless you let it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a quote to admire, it's a way to live. Your peace begins where your impulsive reactions end. When someone insults you, what they're really offering is a choice. Do you respond with anger and throw fuel on the fire? Or do you respond with silence, with reflection, with composure? One leads to chaos, the other leads to freedom. But here's the key, this mastery doesn't come naturally. It's a discipline, it has to be trained. Most people live in emotional autopilot. They get triggered, they lash out, they regret it later. That cycle repeats for years, and they call it personality. But it's not who you are, it's just a lack of training. The Stoic breaks that cycle by becoming the master of their internal state. How? Through awareness, through journaling, silence, morning reflection, through mentally preparing each day for possible insults or challenges. So when they come, you're not shocked, you're ready. You don't have to pretend it doesn't sting, but you do have to choose what comes next. Do you water the wound, or do you breathe, reframe, and keep walking? Think of it like a martial artist. He doesn't walk into a fight hoping nobody swings. He trains for it. He stays calm under pressure, and when the punch comes, he doesn't panic, he flows. That's how your mind should operate when faced with emotional attacks. Respond, don't react. Move with clarity, not chaos. Because the moment you control your response, you've already won. This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect endlessly. It means you stop being controlled by other people's tone. You act from your own values, not from wounded pride. You respond based on what serves your growth, not what satisfies your ego. That's real maturity. So if you want peace, start there, with your response. Train it like a muscle, strengthen it with daily reflection, and remind yourself, it's not what they say that defines you. It's what you do next that does. 6. The wise ego doesn't bite the bait. Every insult is bait. And the ego? It's always hungry. Hungry for validation, for dominance, for the illusion of being right. That's why most people take the bait without even realizing it. A sarcastic comment, a passive-aggressive message, a subtle jab masked as a joke, and suddenly you're in the trap, defending, justifying, attacking back. You've stepped exactly where they wanted you to step. You've handed over your attention, your energy, your peace, all because your ego couldn't walk away. But the Stoic trains for something higher, not to win arguments, but to win self-mastery. The wise ego isn't numb. It feels the pull, but it doesn't bite. It sees the insult for what it is, an emotional hook, and lets it dangle there, untouched. Not because it's afraid, but because it's free. In a world addicted to reaction, restraint is rebellion. Most people live as slaves to their emotional triggers, reacting to everything without pause. A comment from a stranger online can ruin their mood for a day. A rude look from someone in traffic sparks hours of inner turmoil. That's not strength. That's imprisonment. But the one who sees the insult, feels the sting, and still refuses to give it power, that person is unshakable. That person walks with quiet dominance. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion." Think about that. You don't have to internalize what was said. You don't have to label it, judge it, carry it. You can choose to let it pass, to treat it like wind, moving but not meaningful. That is the Stoic's way. And yes, this takes practice, because the ego is loud. It wants to speak, to correct the record, to make sure the other person knows they're wrong. But what's the cost of that reaction? Your clarity, your focus, your inner balance. The price is always too high. Every time you react to provocation, you give the other person control over your emotional state. You hand them the keys, but when you refuse to engage, when you maintain your stillness, you reclaim authority over your own mind. And nothing is more valuable than that. Epictetus once said, "If someone speaks ill of you, rather than defend yourself, say, 'He obviously doesn't know the rest of my faults,' or 'he wouldn't have mentioned only these.'" It's not sarcasm, it's strategy. It's the posture of someone who is not moved by other people's need to provoke. Someone who has mastered the art of emotional self-respect. Let's be honest. People will try to get under your skin. Some will do it to feel superior, others because they're hurt themselves. Sometimes it's not even personal. You're just the nearest target. And if your ego is untrained, you'll take every one of those darts personally. You'll fight battles that don't deserve your presence. You'll give away hours, even days, to emotional noise that should have ended in seconds. But what if, instead, you could see the insult for what it is, an invitation to lose yourself, that you simply decline? What if your ego could evolve from being a guard dog, barking at every perceived threat, into a silent gatekeeper that responds only when it chooses to? That is the kind of discipline that changes everything. To develop this, observe yourself. Notice the moments when your ego wants to jump in. When it whispers, don't let them talk to you like that. Ask yourself, is this about truth or pride? Is this response aligned with my highest self or my most fragile one? Most of the time you'll see clearly, this isn't worth it. And choosing not to respond won't make you smaller. It will make you sovereign. You don't need to prove your worth to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to play a game designed to pull you away from your path. The wise ego understands that silence is not surrender, it's strategy. It's power preserved, it's peace protected. So the next time someone throws shade, don't bite, don't explain, don't retaliate. Stand in your inner calm and let their bait sink into nothing, because the highest form of ego is not the one that roars, but the one that smiles, shrugs, and walks away untouched. The ego wants to bite. The Stoic chooses to rise. 7. Reacting gives power away. There's something deeply ironic about reaction. It feels like taking control, but it's actually surrender. When someone insults you and you explode, you think you're standing up for yourself. When you raise your voice, lash out, or rush to defend your ego, it might feel like power in the moment, but underneath it all, you've just handed over your internal stability to someone else. You've let their words, their mood, their opinions dictate your emotional climate. That's not strength, that's submission in disguise. To the untrained mind, reaction feels justified. They started it. They disrespected me. They need to know I won't tolerate this. But the truth is, the moment you let another person's behavior determine your emotional response, you've given them more power over you than they deserve. You've made them your emotional puppeteer, and they didn't earn that. You granted it to them. Seneca wrote, "A wise man is indifferent to insult, not because he is ignorant of it, but because he rises above it. That's the goal. Not blindness, not silence out of weakness, but the quiet superiority of a mind that chooses what deserves its attention. A mind that doesn't allow every outside trigger to become an inner disturbance. We've all been there. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and suddenly your mood changes for the next hour. A sarcastic comment at work, and your energy dips. A message on your phone, and now you're pacing, your heart racing, replaying what they said and what you should have said back. Reaction is the thief of peace, and we hand it the keys without even realizing. But here's what the Stoics discovered, and what most people miss. Your power lies in your pause, the gap between stimulus and response. In that small space is your freedom, your dignity, your ability to act, not react, to respond with clarity instead of impulse, to choose silence instead of escalation. Every time you resist the urge to react, you reclaim a little more of yourself. You reinforce the boundary between you and everything outside you. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. They want you to snap, to lose your temper, to prove their point about you being irrational or weak. And instead of reacting, you don't. You stay calm. You observe. You respond. Maybe later, maybe not at all. What happens in that moment? You maintain your power. You remain untouchable, and they lose their leverage. Reaction is what most people expect. They want it. They feed off it, because it creates drama, confusion, emotional chaos. But when you break that pattern, when you become unreactive, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability is powerful. It signals maturity. It shows that you're not someone who can be easily manipulated or thrown off track. Of course, none of this is about being passive. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending that nothing matters. It's about choosing the best use of your energy, and reacting to every small offense is not it. You weren't made for petty arguments. You weren't built to fight every comment or respond to every fool. You were made to protect your focus, to cultivate peace, to choose your direction deliberately, not emotionally. To begin practicing this, start small. The next time someone says something that irritates you, pause. Count to 3. Breathe. Ask yourself, if I say something now, who benefits? If the answer is your ego, but not your future, don't say it. Let it go. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. That's a revolutionary idea. You don't have to turn every moment into a crisis. You don't have to participate in every drama. You don't have to react just because you can. Your silence, your restraint, your ability to stay centered, that is your advantage. That is your proof of growth. So remember, every time you react, you give power away. But every time you choose to stay grounded, to pause, to rise above the noise, you take that power back. And over time, those small moments of self-control build something unshakable inside you, something that can't be provoked, insulted, or rattled by others. That's the kind of strength you don't need to show, because it speaks for itself. 8. Shrug and move on. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you simply shrug. Not out of carelessness, not because you don't feel, but because you've chosen to feel differently, because you've outgrown the need to chase closure in every situation or to win every verbal exchange. That shrug, that gentle, invisible gesture of letting go, is one of the most underrated superpowers of the Stoic mind. Most people carry the weight of every comment long after it was made. Someone insults them at 9 a.m. and they're still thinking about it by dinner. They go to bed replaying the conversation. Why? Because the ego refuses to let it go. It wants the last word. It wants justice. It wants to feel superior. But what it really does is prolong suffering. What could have passed in 10 seconds turns into 10 hours of mental noise. And for what? When you learn to shrug, you learn to keep your peace. You learn that not everything deserves your energy. You stop needing to control how others see you. You stop needing to prove your intelligence, your worth, your boundaries. You simply nod inwardly, acknowledge what was said, and move on. Because your time is too valuable to spend explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It takes maturity to recognize that not every insult is an invitation to battle. Sometimes it's just noise, passing, unimportant, not worth the pause. A shrug is not surrender, it's self-respect. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to make this bigger. Seneca once said, he who does not prevent insult invites it. But he didn't mean you must always strike back. He meant that your boundaries must be clear, not by reaction, but by consistency. The strongest boundary isn't yelling back at the person who offended you. It's continuing your life, undisturbed, while they fade into irrelevance. Let's look at it plainly. If someone throws a stone into a river, the water doesn't fight it. It ripples, then settles. That's the Stoic approach to insult. You feel the disturbance briefly, then return to stillness. You shrug. You move on. The alternative? You turn every stone into a war. You create narratives. You rehearse revenge. You drag yourself into battles that cost you far more than they cost them. But what if you started doing the opposite? What if you trained yourself to pause, to mentally shrug, not out of indifference but out of principle? You'd find that 90% of the things that once disturbed you don't even touch you anymore. You'd walk lighter, think clearer, live freer. Practicing this doesn't mean you become emotionally numb. It means you become emotionally efficient. You develop a filter. Not everything gets in. You learn to ask, does this comment deserve an hour of my peace? Does this person's opinion deserve my nervous system? And more often than not, the answer is no. Reacting is easy. Shrugging is discipline. Reacting is what anyone can do. Shrugging, that requires an inner strength most people never build. But if you do, you become someone unshakable. Someone who moves through life with quiet force, with dignity, with emotional independence. It's not always about what you say. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. A calm face, a slow breath, a subtle shrug, and then you carry on, because that's the ultimate display of control. Not needing to win, not needing to be seen, not needing to be right, just needing to stay true to yourself. And in the end, that's who the Stoic is. Not the loudest, not the most reactive, but the one who walks through life with eyes forward, peace intact, and ego in check. 9. Practice indifference like armor. There's a kind of armor that doesn't clank or shine. It's invisible, silent, but stronger than steel. It's called indifference, not the shallow kind, not apathy or emotional detachment, but the deep, deliberate kind that the Stoics cultivated through years of inner training. Indifference, not to life, but to insults, to provocation, to anything that tries to pull you off your path. It's not a lack of feeling. It's the mastery of choosing what deserves to be felt. To the average person, this sounds impossible. How can I not care what people say? How can I be indifferent when someone's trying to humiliate me? But that's the misunderstanding. Stoic indifference isn't about pretending. It's about prioritizing. It's about making a conscious choice not to give your inner world to every external noise. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." So when someone insults you, the sting doesn't come from their words. It comes from your interpretation of them. Your mind says, "This is personal," or "I need to respond," or "They can't talk to me like that." That's where the wound begins. But what if you trained your mind to respond differently? What if you taught yourself to see these moments not as attacks, but as tests? That's where indifference becomes armor. It's the space between you and the world. It's the pause that keeps you from exploding, the distance that protects your peace. And once you feel it, once you really understand how powerful it is, you never want to go back to being easily offended. The truth is, if your peace can be stolen by someone's tone or opinion, you're not free. You're still ruled by emotion. And the Stoics' goal is freedom, not through dominance, but through detachment from the meaningless. Think of it this way: life will always present provocations. People will mock you, criticize you, misunderstand you. Some will try to get under your skin for no reason other than boredom or insecurity. You can't stop that. But you can control what gets through your armor. You can decide that not everything deserves a place inside you. Indifference doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It means you've already decided what's worth your energy, and most things aren't. You still take action when needed. You still speak when it matters. But you don't flinch at every bark. You don't chase every insult down the street. You move through life with clarity and purpose, not reaction. But to develop this indifference, you have to practice daily. You start by noticing when you're tempted to respond, and you don't. You feel the ego rising, and you breathe. You remember that your goal isn't to win the moment, it's to win the day, the month, the year. You remember that peace is power, and anything that threatens it is a distraction in disguise. And here's the thing: the more you practice this kind of indifference, the less dramatic life becomes. You stop being pulled into every little storm. You stop riding the emotional roller coaster. You gain something very few people have: control. And eventually, something shifts. You stop taking everything so personally. You stop needing to defend yourself. You start walking through the world like a mountain, still, unmoved, grounded, and suddenly all the noise outside doesn't seem so loud anymore. Because your armor isn't anger, it's indifference, and it protects what matters most: your focus, your values, your mission. That's what the Stoic understands. You don't need to fight every insult. You need to rise above them. Not once, not twice, but consistently, as a way of life. That's how you become untouchable, not by silencing the world, but by training yourself to listen only to what truly matters. 10. No one can offend your soul. There is a place within you that no insult can reach. A part of you untouched by opinion, immune to ridicule, indifferent to praise. The Stoics believed that your soul, your core, is inviolable, and that all suffering from insult arises when you forget that truth, when you mistake the ego for the self, when you confuse the noise of others for your identity. What is your soul? It's not something mystical or abstract. It's your character, your reason, your values. It's the part of you that chooses what's right when no one's watching, the part that doesn't flinch when others judge you. And once you understand that no external force can touch it, not a comment, not a sneer, not even a lie, you begin to move through life differently. You stop living on the surface. You stop reacting from the skin. You start living from within, because that's where your real power lies, not in appearances, not in defense, but in rootedness, in knowing that the world can insult your name, your clothes, your voice, but it cannot insult your soul unless you let it. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: if you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them, and it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. That's the core teaching. You don't have to accept every opinion that enters your ears. You don't have to carry every insult into your heart. You are not what they say. You are what you do, repeatedly, in silence with conviction. This doesn't mean you won't feel hurt. You're human. You will. But the Stoic doesn't aim for a life without emotion. He aims for a life where emotion doesn't control the direction, where insult is acknowledged, but not absorbed, where judgment is witnessed, but not owned. Imagine this: someone shouts a cruel insult at you. They want to provoke, to diminish, to dominate, but instead of flaring up, you breathe. You feel the sting, but you don't follow it. You don't reply. You don't explain. You simply remember. They spoke to the mask, not to the soul. They aimed for your surface, and you are not your surface. And then, with stillness, you walk away. Not out of weakness, but out of total self-possession. That is strength. That is freedom. That is living from the soul. It's a kind of quiet rebellion in today's world, refusing to be defined by echo chambers, online noise, or reactive cultures, refusing to let the temporary emotions of others disturb your permanent essence, because your soul is not public property. It doesn't shift with likes or comments or applause. It remains what it always was: yours. To cultivate this kind of immunity, you need practice, reflection, stillness, and above all, a commitment to return again and again to what's essential, to your values, to your discipline, to your purpose. Every time someone tries to provoke you, remember, the test is not in the insult. The test is in your response, and if you meet it with silence and strength, you pass. You remain whole, untouched, soul intact. The Stoic doesn't chase approval. He doesn't fear disapproval, because he knows the truth. You cannot insult someone who doesn't identify with the insult. You cannot shake someone who stands on the solid ground of their own character. So the next time you feel offended, ask yourself, did they insult me? Or did they simply reflect their own ignorance? And then remind yourself, no one, absolutely no one, can offend your soul unless you give them the key. And that is the most unbreakable freedom of all. Most people live at the mercy of words. One insult ruins their day. One opinion shakes their worth. One comment controls their mind. But the Stoic lives differently, not because he's numb, but because he's trained. He's built an inner fortress where peace is protected and the opinions of others echo, but never enter. You see, it's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming intentional, about choosing not to bleed for every word, not to bend for every judgment, not to crumble at every sign of disapproval. It's about remembering that you, your values, your dignity, your soul, are not for sale, not for applause, not for acceptance, and certainly not for the approval of those who haven't earned your attention. When you become immune to insults, you don't become passive, you become powerful, because you no longer waste energy explaining yourself, defending your image, or repairing the fragile ego that the world wants to keep shaking. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to rise instead of retaliate. You become untouchable, not because you're above others, but because you're grounded in something deeper. So the next time someone throws a word like a weapon, pause, breathe, remember who you are, and walk on. Because your strength is not in your comebacks, it's in your calm. Your power is not in being loud, it's in being unmoved. And your freedom, your real Stoic freedom, is found in the quiet refusal to be shaken by noise. If this episode helped center you, inspired you, or reminded you of your strength, share it with someone who needs it. And if you are ready to build this kind of peace into every part of your life, subscribe, because this is only the beginning of the journey. Until next time, protect your peace, live from the soul, and stay unshakable.